Okay, so you know how people always say reading moral stories makes kids better people, right? Like, think about that book, Book of Virtues. What was it? William Bennett.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Huge bestseller. And it kind of plays on this idea that's super common, like if we show kids stories about, I don't know, courage or honesty or whatever, it's
Yeah.
like we're building their moral compass or
It's
something.
it's really appealing, isn't it? Like, just expose them to good examples and they'll absorb it.
Right, exactly. And
Ah.
that's what we're going to look at in this deep dive. But like, does just reading these stories actually make kids develop good character? Because I don't know, like there's all this research about how kids understand stuff, how their sense of right and wrong actually develops.
And it gets complicated.
It does. It gets a lot more complicated
It
than that.
way more.
So for this deep dive, we're mainly looking at this article by Darcia Narvaez. It's called "Does Reading Moral Stories Build Character?"
Catchy title.
Right. She really breaks down all these assumptions that people have about using stories to teach morals and looks at a bunch of studies.
And she's looking at it like from the perspective of these traditional character educators. They're the ones who think like society's values are going downhill, kids have more behavioral problems.
They're the declinists.
Yeah, exactly. They're the declinists. And they think it's super important to actively teach kids about morality. And for them, stories with clear virtues, with heroes to look up to, are like a core tool.
So they think good literature can make kids feel empathy, you know, put themselves in others' shoes and help them figure out the difference between right and wrong actions.
Right. It's all about showing them how to behave through these engaging narratives.
So basically, they think kids are just like sponges, right? They just soak up the moral message.
The passive reader idea.
Yeah, passive reader. But what research actually shows is that readers, you know, especially kids, they're not passive at all.
No, not at all. They're actively creating meaning. Like they're drawing on their own knowledge, their experiences, those mental frameworks they've already built up.
Those are the schemas.
Yeah, the schemas. Think of them like organized packets of information. Like when you read Max looked both ways before crossing the street, you just get it right.
Right.
You have that crossing the street schema, cars, traffic rules, safety. It's all there.
Okay, so schemas, they're like these mental shortcuts our brains use based on what we already know.
Exactly. And they work in a top-down way. Like we use them to understand new information.
So even when we're reading, we're using our existing knowledge to interpret what's going on.
And that's why it's called constructively responsive reading. Like you bring your own baggage to the story.
Their own unique experiences. So the way you understand a story might be totally different from how someone else understands it.
Totally. And that's where it gets tricky, right? If a kid hasn't had certain experiences or if they don't have the right schemas.
They might totally miss the point.
Exactly. They might misunderstand things, misremember details, or even like twist the story to fit what they already believe, even if that's not what the author intended.
Like in that War of the Ghosts study.
Oh yeah, that one's classic. They had people from one culture read a folktale from a totally different culture. And over time, when they tried to retell the story, they changed stuff without even realizing it.
They made it fit their own cultural expectations.
Exactly. And there are other studies that show similar things, like people misremembering routines from different cultures, or even interpreting a prison escape as a wrestling match because that's what they're familiar with.
So that their brains are trying to make sense of it based on what they already know.
Right, and that's the point. Readers aren't just blank slates. They're shaping the meaning as they go. And for kids reading moral stories, that shaping can lead to some unexpected results.
Okay, so we're active readers, not passive.
Yeah.
And then you bring in moral development, right? Like Piaget, Kohlberg, that neo-Kohlbergian stuff.
Right, right. It's all connected.
So how does our own moral reasoning, like how we personally figure out right and wrong, how does that affect how we understand these stories?
Well, these theories, they suggest we have different ways of approaching moral dilemmas, like the neo-Kohlbergian idea of moral schemas.
So there are these different schemas for how we think about right and wrong.
Yeah, like focusing on personal interests, what benefits me. Then there's understanding and maintaining norms, following the rules. And then there's the post-conventional schema, where you think about bigger ethical principles, even if they clash with the rules.
So those are like stages, right? Like you move from one to the next.
It's more like a progression. You can understand multiple levels, but the higher levels build on the lower ones. And get this, the ability to understand these different moral perspectives, it actually correlates with how well you score on moral judgment tests.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Like, there was this study where middle school and college students read stories with different levels of moral reasoning in them, and the students who scored higher on those moral judgment tests, They were better at remembering the more complex arguments, and they even added their own sophisticated reasoning when they retold the stories.
So it's not just about being a good reader. It's about how you already think about morality.
Exactly. Your moral framework affects what you take away from these stories.
Okay, so we're actively constructing meaning, and our own moral development plays a role. Now let's talk about theme, like the main message, what's the point of the story. Narvaez says that figuring out the theme is actually really tough, especially for kids.
Oh, yeah, definitely. There's research showing that summarizing the point of a story is harder than summarizing the events. And kids, well, they really struggle with this until like 9 or 10 years old.
Makes sense. I mean, I remember being a kid and just wanting to know what happened next.
Right. And even as adults, sometimes we miss the deeper meaning.
Totally.
Yeah.
Like, have you ever walked out of a movie with your friends and everyone has a totally different interpretation?
Oh, all the time.
Right, it happens. So
Yeah.
theme, it's not automatic. You have to be able to generalize, see the bigger picture.
And it's easier if you're familiar with the topic.
Which brings us to Narvaez's own research. She looked at how well kids understand moral themes in stories. What did she find?
Well, she did these studies with third graders, fifth graders, and college students. And she used different ways to test their understanding. Like she'd ask them to say the theme, choose the best theme from a list, or match themes across different stories. There were big differences depending on age. Like the younger kids were way less likely to get the intended moral theme, even when they were good readers overall.
So if they're not getting the intended message, what are they getting?
Well, they're making their own interpretations,
Yeah.
building their own themes based on what they understand. Like Narvaez gives this example of some readers interpreting Law and Order as just being about avoiding punishment.
Which is a much simpler way of thinking about it.
Right. And then there's that classic example of kids reading The Three Little Pigs.
Oh, right. They focus on the don't trust strangers message.
Yeah. Yeah, for kindergartners, safety is a huge deal, so that's what sticks out to them. And Narvaez's research had other examples of kids coming up with totally unintended themes.
Like what?
Well, for The Monkey and the Rabbit, instead of the moral about accepting differences, kids came up with things like, don't be alone in the jungle, or don't scratch while you're eating.
Okay, so kids are definitely coming up with their own stuff. But do the people pushing for character education, do they even want kids to make their own interpretations?
It's a good question, because think about it. What if a kid reads the story of Jacob and Esau, or even George Washington and the cherry tree?
Yeah, they could come up with some pretty weird interpretation.
Right. So what about adult intervention? Like, can't a teacher or parent just step in and explain the right message?
Yeah, seems like a simple fix.
But it might not be that easy. Think about it. Even as adults, it's hard to change our minds once we have a strong interpretation of something.
Like, I know I get stuck in my ways sometimes.
Right. And for kids who are still learning how to think flexibly, it's even harder. They might say they agree with the adult, but deep down, they might still hold on to their original understanding.
So just explaining it might not be enough.
Exactly. Strong schemas, those deeply held beliefs, they're tough to change. And Narvaez points out that the traditional character educators, they don't really talk about how to help kids understand these moral themes.
It's all about the stories themselves.
Right. They assume this moral contagion effect, like just expose kids to the stories and virtue will magically spread.
But we've seen that's not how it works.
Nope. It's more like a game of telephone. The message gets distorted along the way. Now, research does show that kids can understand themes better with good instruction, like using carefully planned questions, but we're still figuring out what the key ingredients are.
Like, what do kids need to understand in order to apply a moral from a story to their own lives?
Exactly. And it seems like those quick interventions, they might not cut it, especially for younger kids. Their moral reasoning might just not be there yet.
So it's way more complex than just giving a kid a book of stories and expecting them to become a saint.
Way more. But why do you think this misconception about moral stories persists?
Well, Narvaez talks about something called adult expertise bias.
Yes. That's where we, as experts, we forget how hard it was to learn this stuff. Like, we've read these stories a million times, the themes seem obvious, and we assume kids will get it just as easily.
We forget what it's like to be a beginner.
Exactly. And the other reason is that some of these character education folks, they seem to be working with outdated ideas about learning.
Like they haven't kept up with the research.
Right. They ignore all this stuff about active meaning making, about how different readers interpret things differently. They basically dismiss the idea that there can be multiple interpretations, which is a huge deal in how we understand reading today.
So what are the big takeaways here? What do these traditional character educators need to know?
Okay, first, reading is active. It's not passive. Second, readers understand texts differently. Third, the author's message doesn't automatically get through. Fourth, themes are constructed, not just absorbed. And fifth, moral messages are a specific kind of theme, and they're influenced by reading skills and moral development.
So that idea that reading moral stories automatically builds character, well, the research just doesn't support it.
And Narvaez even suggests that maybe we need to rethink what we even mean by character these days. Like with all the new research on personality and development, maybe that old idea of character as a bunch of virtues is too simplistic.
Okay, so back to our original question. Does simply reading moral stories automatically build character in kids? I think it's safe to say it's not that straightforward.
Definitely not. You're an active learner, you bring your own knowledge and experiences to the table, and your own moral understanding is developing. All of that affects how you make sense of these stories.
So while these stories can be helpful, they're not a magic bullet.
Right. It all depends on the kid and how they engage with the material.
And that brings us to a final thought for you, dear listener. If just reading these stories isn't enough, what are some better ways to help kids develop morally? Like, what about having them discuss these dilemmas, giving them real-life situations to think about?
Or maybe even more direct moral instruction.
Right, food for thought.
Definitely.
Okay, that's it